Give us more perspective in terms of what Israel's strategy is likely to be. We're being joined by Ms. Tal Enrick, who is an Israeli government spokesperson, and she's joining us from New York. Now, Ms. Enrick, this is a pivotal moment, and this is being watched closely around the world. Now, what happens, once the agreed for ceasefire actually ends? Will Israeli government now want to continue pursuing this part of exchanging the hostages that are in the custody of Hamas in exchange for Palestinian prisoners, or does Israel want to resume military operations? What is the talk within the Netanyahu administration?
Thank you for having me on, Mohammed. These two things that you just mentioned are not contradictory, but before I answer your question directly, I'll just give you this update because I just received this official statement that two more Israeli hostages were released. Mia, she's 21-year-old, and Amit, 40-year-old, and we're expecting the release of more hostages in the coming hours, hopefully. We're talking about a seventh group of hostages so far, and there are still over 140 hostages being kept in the Gaza Strip by Hamas. So as you know, we have agreed to this outline by which for every extra 10 Israeli hostages that Hamas would release, we said that we will give another extra day of humanitarian pause in the fighting, and that we agree to release, as part of the framework that has been discussed through international mediators, to release more Palestinian prisoners who have been involved in terrorist activity. So again, for every extra 10 hostages, another day of pause. But when Hamas stops releasing more hostages, we will stop the pause and we will go back to fighting to reach the goal of eliminating the Hamas terrorist regime in Gaza. And we are determined to bring back all the hostages. Now, as you know, and as President Biden stated correctly just a few days ago, Hamas only responds to pressure, military pressure, and the diplomatic pressure that we're exerting in various ways. This is the only reason why we have seen the release of some of the hostages so far, but we will leave nobody behind.
All right, you're saying that you will leave nobody behind because you are a spokesperson of the Israeli government. I would assume that this is what the Israeli government's position is. Now, Hamas has in fact said that they want to release all Israeli hostages in exchange for a ceasefire, a permanent ceasefire. Is this a position that is something that is acceptable to the Israeli government?
We said that we have two goals for this operation, and we said it right after the October 7th massacre: to bring back everyone who was kidnapped into Gaza home and to eliminate the Hamas regime in Gaza. Because we took this decision as a nation, not just as a government, not just as a cabinet, and not just the prime minister. The Israeli nation took this decision that we will no longer live next to a terrorist enclave. Gaza can no longer pose a terrorist threat to the state of Israel. This is a situation that is impossible. We will not go back to the reality that predated the October 7th massacre. And we want to be able to tell the hostages who returned home over the past few days that they are completely safe, Mohammed. How can we tell these women and children who came back home that Hamas will not kidnap them again, that Hamas will not butcher their communities again or rain missiles on their communities again? Right. So Hamas must be gone.
My final question to you, Ms. Enrick, is this. Now, within the Israeli government, there are the likes of Itamar Ben-Gvir, who is the internal security minister, and he has said that a ceasefire means that the coalition automatically breaks, which means that Netanyahu's government falls. How does Netanyahu take elements such as Itamar Ben-Gvir along with him to secure the release of all hostages?
You see, right now, there is no coalition in opposition in Israel. When Hamas terrorists butchered us, they didn't care who we voted for, as you know. So we're all united in this. And a ceasefire would mean the terrorists can get away with what they did. And not only, we need to send an unequivocal message against terrorism, because Hamas leaders say that they will perpetrate the October 7th massacre for a second, a third, a fourth time. And by the way, only this morning, we saw two more terrorist attacks taking place in Israel. One in Jerusalem, where 3 Israelis were murdered and a dozen more injured, and one in the Jordan Valley. that injured 2 Israeli soldiers. So we cannot allow terrorists to just get away with what they did with impunity, because that invites more trouble. And therefore, a permanent ceasefire is not on the table, not until Hamas is eliminated.
All right, Ms. Henrik, thank you very much indeed for joining us and getting us that perspective there.
Thank you, Mohammed.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.